Everyone told you about the boulder, the endless hill, the eternal failure. But nobody ever asked you this. How did this man physically imprison death? How did he trick Hades twice and walk away? And why exactly did the gods choose that specific punishment? Because the answer is nothing like what you've been told. Sisyphus was the founder and first king of Corinth. But he wasn't just a king. He was considered the single most intelligent mortal who ever lived. So clever that the gods themselves were unsettled by him. Homer called him the craftiest of men, and Zeus knew it. That is exactly where everything began. One day, Zeus abducted the daughter of a river god named Sisyphus. Any other mortal would have looked away. Sisyphus went directly to Sisyphus and told him everything. He exposed Zeus's secret, the king of the gods. Zeus's fury was so complete, he sent Thanatos himself to deal with it. Thanatos, the literal personification of death, not a soldier, not a monster. Death itself showed up at Sisyphus's door, and Sisyphus had already prepared for it. When Thanatos arrived, Sisyphus welcomed him calmly. "Have you seen these chains?" he said. "Let me show you how they work." And as Thanatos leaned in out of curiosity, Sisyphus snapped them shut. He had shackled death. Think about what that actually means. Death itself was in a cage, and the consequences were immediate and horrifying. No one on earth could die. Battles raged. Bodies were shattered. Blood soaked the ground. But death wouldn't come. Ares, god of war, was so furious that war had become meaningless that he personally intervened. Ares freed Thanatos, and Thanatos came back, this time without curiosity, only purpose. He seized Sisyphus and dragged him to the underworld. But before dying, Sisyphus had whispered one instruction to his wife. "Do not perform my funeral rites." Not a single one. She obeyed, and standing before Hades' throne, Sisyphus began to complain. "My own wife performed no rites for me, no offerings, no burial. Let me return to the living for 3 days to punish her. 3 days only. I swear it." Hades wanted to believe him, and he did. Hades released him, and Sisyphus returned to the living world, and stayed. He lived for years. He grew old in the sunlight. He had beaten death twice, and Hades once. The boulder, that came later, much later. And the real reason the gods chose that specific punishment, that part has never been properly explained. Eventually, Hermes came personally and dragged him back. There was no trick left to play, and Hades chose the punishment. But why the boulder specifically? Ancient sources suggest the boulder was sized to match the scale of Sisyphus's arrogance. Every push upward, every fall back down, wasn't simply revenge. It was a message. No matter how clever you are, you cannot break our order. You cannot control chaos. You cannot escape what we decide. The boulder wasn't torture. It was a reminder, carved specifically for him. But here is what the ancient Greeks buried inside this story. When Sisyphus reaches the top of the mountain, right before the boulder rolls back, there is one single moment where he stands at the summit. And philosophers have argued for centuries about what happens in that moment. Albert Camus, writing thousands of years later, believed he knew the answer. He wrote that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, because the climb itself was his. The gods could take everything. They could not take his effort, his defiance, his refusal to stop. The boulder was a punishment. The climbing was his. But the real question has to be asked. Did Sisyphus actually lose? The gods gave him an eternal punishment, but in doing so, they gave him eternal existence. A Sisyphus without the boulder would be one of history's most forgotten names. Because of that rock, we are still talking about him 3,000 years later. He is in our philosophy, in our psychology, in our literature, in our language. Maybe the gods never calculated that. Sometimes the greatest punishment becomes the greatest legacy. Greek mythology always told you the stories of the winners. We tell you the real stories, the ones underneath. Subscribe, because next week we're covering a god who sacrificed his own son, and that story is far less clean than this one.